I'm here today with Hashley Giles, known by some of his friends as Jez, I believe. So hopefully I can call you Jez. Is that all right?
You can call me Jez, Gary.
Great. I'm sure you've been called much worse.
Absolutely.
But with that glowing introduction, thanks for being on the podcast. And maybe you want to just give a quick introduction to anyone that doesn't know your background and a bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm a UK business owner, early zooming down on mid-50s soon, which, is not great news. Yeah, hopefully there's life in the old dog yet. And I always worked for myself, from the north, live in London, and stumbled into Bitcoin late 2020, second lockdown. And I guess was quite frustrated in the fact, I'm not a technical person. And after a few months, you're thinking, well, how can I help? How can I do something? And so found with a sales background and running a business in training sales teams that onboarding merchants came reasonably naturally. So did that, hosted some events, and then we onboarded Tutu Market. And so that the size of event and merchant got bigger and bigger and bigger. But then after a couple of years, running events every month with, a lot of the time the same people, which was great. It sort of, runs its course and other people are jumping in and running their own events, which is great. And so back earlier, it was actually around Christmas time. And it was around the time that Joe Bryan, he sent me a copy of his video before it was released. And I was like, Jesus, mate, this is like incredible. And I thought, what else could I do? And I'd been online and listened to, obviously, a reasonable amount of Bitcoin content. I'm not a massive podcast listener. I'm not a book reader, but I loved the platform of Twitter Spaces. However, the American sort of Twitter Spaces community, it just was irrelevant. So I remember chatting to a few people and said, why don't we do one? And I think it was second week of January, we did one, went down well. And then, 6 months on, they've been going strong and are sort of going to be reborn. When you air this, they'll already been reborn under the Bitcoin Town Hall with Jordan and the Bitcoin Collective. So I've thoroughly enjoyed doing them. Listened to some amazing people, interesting people. And it's been, I think it's been great. And I think it's been, I think it's a really interesting channel for the UK.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm an OG for your.
Yeah, you're there. Yeah,
night.
Weekly.
Yeah,
season ticket holder.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I've found them all for various different reasons. They've all been interesting. They've all been great, to be honest. And it's just good to have that variety.
In doing it, I remember I've got a whiteboard in my office, and after doing the first couple, which was obvious, there was a general chat. Then it was BP UK. We wanted to make it UK focused. And then I was like, crikey, I'm going to run out of topics. But actually the reverse has happened of people reaching out with interesting stories or brands. I mean, Smarter Web.
Thank God he reached out.
Yeah, well, that was an idea. And it's great because what we want to do with the spaces, and I know James, who runs the Smarter Web community, does a great job. And it was a difficult one because we'd staggered with Andrew to do I think monthly shareholder updates. But actually, we have to remain just very neutral in everything because if there's another treasury company who wants the space, I just think spaces for me are, and maybe it's mine because I've got a very low attention span and I'm not a great reader or listener. It's almost live. Well, it is live, but some news could drop and you can just press that button and boom. And I think it's a fascinating way of communicating.
Yeah, and the different people on it, often they're bouncing ideas off each other,
yes.
Or you go on a tangent and actually the conversation goes in another direction. But yeah, no, I think it's been great, especially as you say, it's a real UK focus. And
we need it. We need it.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We'll come on to conferences a bit later, maybe, rather than going straight there now. But yeah, we've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole already. But what I ask all my guests, Jez, and you'll be no exception, is what was your first memory of money as a child?
Oh, I remember, and I remember being told by my parents I was an amazing saver. But I do think that's because I lived in the middle of nowhere and there was nowhere to spend it. And I do remember having a TSB booklet. I mean, Gary, I'm nearly 54, so we are going back. Like, it was like in a sort of jeans material to make it look cool, and it had sort of these ins as opposed to outs. I remember my grandparents or my mother's father having very little. I remember turning up to his house in North Wales going, crossing, as a 13-year-old going, Jesus, this is, not great. And I also remember being at school and actually often chat about this with mates of mine who I was at school with. And I think we were in the era when interest rates got to like 16, 17%. And it was tough. And I used to play a lot of, cricket, and it wasn't, the time of low cost flights, so people didn't go abroad. And if you did go abroad, you get dropped 3 teams, so you didn't go away in the summer. But yeah, it was very different to how it is now. I look at it with my sort of daughter now and sometimes think, things seems to be on tap a little bit. I remember, and I've always loved cooking, and I put that down to my late father. He wasn't a cook himself, but he had a allotment, and later on went on to run a gardening nursery from being a chemical engineer. And I'll never forget, on coming in with like massive marrows and cauliflowers and whatever. And, and I think that's where I got a love of cooking from. My mother was a very good cook. My dad was sort of, hunter-gatherer in the garden, but just this sort of fresh produce. I mean, and that goes to the amount of, I know it's total divergence, but, so I ate well as a kid, was brought up with sort of good food, good recipes. You see it now. I mean, crikey, walk down any city or town centre high street at kicking out time of school and look at the bus stops and look at what these kids eat. It's outrageous.
Yeah, everything's in plastic or foil.
Yeah, 100%.
Everything's ultra processed just to make it cheap and cheerful, but
yeah, it's absolutely.
Yeah, it's just all the ultra processed foods, which are, well, it's not really food, is it?
But I think that back to your point of what's your experience of money, we didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
In the fact that, oh, hold on, my dad's growing stuff that we're now eating.
But were you aware and around other people that did have a lot?
I was at private school, which, back then was not as much of a commitment. If you look at a chart of the increase in private school fees over the years versus income, there were a lot of, my dad was middle management, most people middle management. No, not really. It wasn't until I got to university where I met some people who, different world. I was in the Northeast at uni, but you go 21st birthdays and someone's family would put 4 50-seater coaches on from the Northeast down to the Midlands. And then you'd appear in this estate, and it was like, Jesus, different world. And then went straight into business after uni. I mean, I did terribly at uni and sort of, I went into sales and ended up working for myself eventually.
What did you do at university? What was your subject?
So I did, 2 degrees. I did medical chemistry. That lasted 8 weeks.
Okay.
I then did agricultural biochemistry, because that was something with a science twist, but it had very few hours of lectures. And then I got, I got told I didn't even get a third. I got a pass.
Wow. Okay.
Because I never went, because I actually had no interest. And time again, I'd have just gone and skipped uni and either gone to Australia and played cricket for a year, or would have just gone straight into working, because I just wasn't for me. The social side of uni was amazing. The academic learning side, zero interest.
Yeah, I think my experience wasn't desperately dissimilar to yours. I did get a, as they're called at the time, Desmond, a 2-2. But,
yeah.
But yeah, I think it was kind of a done thing. I think if you're in a school where academically you were doing well academically, then it was just assumed you'd go off to university.
It was almost a non-negotiable. It was It was.
Although no one else in my family had been, so I was. My parents hadn't been, but it was just the school I went to was a reasonably good school. But I think that the other key difference is back then you didn't have to pay tuition fees, and
no, absolutely.
And if your parents didn't earn lots of money, you got grants towards your living costs. So I didn't come out with loads of debt. I just had a couple of student loans that basically I'd spent on beer and records and whatever else anyway.
I mean, I had the student loan. I think it was 792 quid. I can remember it the first 2 terms, and about 680 the last time. But I worked all the way through university.
Yeah.
So I used to work in a pub or various pubs, and then played football for one of the pubs and got some, preferential stuff, and then played a lot of cricket, and then got summer jobs through people in the cricket team who I was playing for. And so I was always used to working and earning. And actually that became more important than going to lectures. It was like, I tell you what, working with this fish guy and doing some sales on the phone, I'll skip a load of lectures and work for him to be, paid. And so that's where it sort of came from, I guess, the sort of, dare I say it without sounding cheesy, almost the entrepreneurial bit of this is where I want to be.
Yeah, that's great. And then, so starting your own business then, was that just something that felt completely natural?
After a couple of years of leaving uni, I've never worked for anyone.
Wow.
I think, it's a personality thing, isn't it? I always found it probably, and I was a reasonably decent cricketer who played a pretty high level, not international. Some people get the name mixed up. But my strength actually was as a captain in terms of the strategy. And I always loved even getting at school, maybe the kids with not so much talent, getting them involved in the game. And if they're involved in the game and you win, it's very easy sport in cricket where individuals can dominate. But I was always about, if we bowl a team out quickly, let's go and give everyone a bat, reverse the order, give this kid a bowl when there's a... And I always loved that whole sort of team spirit element to sport. And I think I found that transition into running in sales teams, very similar to sport, where, people have their individual strengths, their weaknesses, but actually as a collective, that's where the strength is. And ironically, I think that's what we're finding in, the UK Bitcoin scene now, that people are from all these different backgrounds, walks of life, the real technical people, the vocal people, the people with an, financial background, people who are comfortable to get on screen like you and host a podcast. And it does feel, again, I'm not taking personal credit, but I think that's what the space has done, is almost bring this community a bit closer together.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that you are, like anything, you are stronger in numbers.
What you said earlier about starting the spaces because you wanted to do something.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's true for a lot of us. Obviously, yes. I've started a podcast. I'm an accountant, got no experience. Some would say no skills in in media training or anything else. But the way I look at it is, it's just having conversation.
You're good at it. It's amazing, actually, how many accountants and financial people are involved with Bitcoin in the UK.
Yeah, especially because the significant majority of accountants and IFAs or whatever will openly admit until they found Bitcoin, they didn't know what money was. I mean, it's Joe Bryan was the same, speaking to him, with working in, pretty high flying finance. And yet you're just in that echo chamber world of whatever it is you're doing. And, you don't ever question it.
Yeah, it was, I mean, the actual, and then second lockdown was the whole Bitcoin thing. But the first lockdown, we were taking on loads of debt because obviously the government were offering loans out. We needed to take loans on to stabilize the business, keep the doors open, etc. And we took a huge amount of debt on, which frankly, thankfully we've paid off. But that's where things started to not make sense of, hold on, I just fill out a form and you essentially go and put 750 grand in my business account.
Jeez.
How does that work?
Yeah. Now, who's paying for that?
That's not, and that didn't go to buy that. That was like, okay, well, this is us staying alive now. We had certain stuff to do over, and actually our business didn't trade properly. I worked it out the other day. I think it was 23 months because because we're a consumer facing business, when we came out of lockdowns, we had to give a lot of our margin away and various stuff. So it was a couple of years, and it wasn't easy at all. But that then sort of set the trigger of, I've never thought about this. I've always worked for myself. I've always done okay. You've bought a property, the property's gone up in value, you've sold it, you've moved somewhere bigger, nicer, whatever. You don't question it. And then suddenly you're faced with, oh shit, I might lose the business because we can't trade. Someone's giving me a load of cash. I've got 5 years to pay it back. How does this all work? And then suddenly the second lockdown, I stumble into Bitcoin through a school dad friend who I went, when you could walk with one person, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And he knew a company who was an exchange based out of Scotland who were looking to gain more customers, and that's what we do, and introduced us. And we had a long chat, and they said, oh, you should research this. And I had time on my hands. We'd restructured the business in the first lockdown, so I had some time on my hands, and it was second lockdown, you're going to learn Spanish or get really good at darts, and then you watch a couple of Max Kaiser videos. And then the cherry on top is you then go, this is all a bit weird. My daughter's nearly 5, and her initials are BTC.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're not Satoshi, are you?
Nothing, mate. But that was a weird thing. You're like, okay. But it made sense very quickly to me.
Okay, so did you have a preconceived view of what Bitcoin was? Did you think it was a scam? So you must have heard of it before then.
I think I'd heard it 3 or 4 times in passing comments.
Okay. But you were kind of just lumping Bitcoin in with crypto in general, and no?
Crypto I'd never got involved with, and never bought anything else.
Yeah. No, but what I mean is, before you started learning and educating yourself about Bitcoin, what were your preconceived thoughts about what it was? Was it just that it was this thing that people talked about? But
no, I very quickly, with the sort of fixed supply, and I guess the similarities to gold resonated, whereas the rest of the crypto stuff, I remember I subscribed to Real Vision for a while, and there was some really interesting content, and then it went all metaverse, NFTs, Web3s, and I was like, I'm cancelling my subscription because this stuff, A, I don't understand, and B, I think it's shit. And I am quite a black and white character in terms of and I understood the fundamentals of BTC. The rest of the stuff, I thought, I don't understand it. I'm not sure what it does, and I'm really not interested. So I made that sort of decision very early. So yeah, I think I'm probably one of the few to never buy anything else.
Wow, congratulations.
So in position.
Do you think that's maybe because you're maybe a bit more financially secure, a bit older, a bit wiser?
There's an age thing, and I think that's what shocked me about running my first couple of events 4 years ago, where we said, okay, X restaurant accepts BTC, sign up on Eventbrite. I was shocked with the age of the people. I was expecting something way younger. I think Coin Corner have done this really interesting report not so long ago about the sort of age of your crypto buyers and your Bitcoin hodlers. And it's a big difference. So, yeah, I think age certainly has, I think, not wanting to look at a screen all day, every day, never traded, never want to trade, don't trade, never bought stocks and shares, no interest, and just something that made sense. And I think as a business owner, you have probably an advantage in the fact you have the ability to think a bit longer term. So 4 8-year cycles or 4-year cycles, 8. Whereas I think today, obviously, with the youngsters, we're living in a more instant society where
4 weeks is a long time.
Yeah, and you've got access to information and being able with crypto to trade 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, so you can certainly see the attraction, but I think there is certainly now, probably since Trump came in, when they did that whole, which let's see whether it happens, but a strategic reserve versus a digital asset stockpile, that whole discussion with people of crypto, Bitcoin, that's disappeared. because there is a complete differential now, which is great.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when it became, there was a little bit of a concern initially, wasn't there, that Trump, it came out saying
Tweet came out and it had 3 or 4 tokens.
And it didn't even mention Bitcoin. And then he said, "Oh, and of course, Bitcoin and ETH or something." And then, of course, a week or two after that.
But we'll see. Look, I have to be honest with you. You know, it's had a lot of hype, and I know these things take time, but nothing's happened.
No. Well, they haven't even for Fort Knox or for Bitcoin. I don't think they've even come out and announced the kind of proof of reserves and
but like all, you think things are going to get done. There must be whatever reason. So let's see. I don't, back to the UK. I don't. Where's our 61,000?
Yeah, who knows? And I would like to say they're in safe hands, but
Reg Hollis from the Bill has probably lost his seed phrase. Who knows? But I find that, I find the whole lack of curiosity, especially, you saw Emma Reynolds, who's now, I think, the chief economic person.
Treasury advisor.
Remember a few weeks ago, and her sort of really sarcastic reply back to Freddie. And you're like, that is no way to act. So either A, they see it as a joke, B, they're incredibly threatened by it, or C, they just don't understand it. And I think I've mentioned this on Spaces before. I went to the FT Digital Assets event. Jordan actually had a ticket, but he didn't have a suit, so I went. And it was interesting. And I met a lady from the FCA who's one of the senior people, and she was a lovely lady. Clueless. And I'm not having a go at her. She was quite new into the job, but almost trying to oversee and appraise something you have no idea about. I mean, could you imagine if that was like a minister of housing or so I think it's just, it's something no one has taken seriously.
Yeah, I don't see how that's excusable, though. I know you don't either, but, it's one thing to say, I don't know anything about it. Well, fucking learn something then. It's not, there's plenty of people that would invest time and effort in helping people in the government to understand what it is, but it's inexcusable to say, well, I don't
think it's, it's not just the latest government. I think it was the one before as well. But I find it so strange that I say it's actually not strange. You've now got, I think I saw, was it yesterday, Michael's, I didn't know whether to take it seriously. There's Michael Saylor advising the Pakistan government.
Yeah. I saw a little video clip of him talking to them. Yeah,
and it's like, and that's the thing about it that I don't think people have got their head around is this is a truly global asset that has its different use cases in different territories and jurisdictions. One of my best friends lives in South Africa. An English guy, has a business out there. His sales team in SA, they're shopping using Lightning at pick and pay supermarkets. They're not using it as a store of value because these guys are, a lot of them, young and they're debanked. But they got a mobile phone. Well, so that's one thing. And sure, yes, he pays some bonuses in BTC and they want to keep, but it's a transactional thing for them. Whereas I guess, do we need in the UK BTC payments? We don't. Guys like me and you, will support a merchant, but our payment infrastructure, whilst you could criticize fees, spreads, chargebacks, whatever, it actually works.
Yeah, and for the individual, they don't see a lot of those fees anyway. So
no, absolutely,
you go and get a haircut and pay your 20 quid on your credit card. That the person that cut your hair probably sees £19.50 of it. Whereas if you pay in cash, they keep the £20.
Yeah.
It's that Bitcoin.
Yeah. But we do in the UK, we have far lower transaction fees than, say, the US. I mean, some of the, payment processors with merchants, and obviously we've been dealing with merchants, they are paid. It's like a race to the bottom in terms of fees. Whereas the US, it's a lot more expensive. It's almost like, I think the US is, the fees in the US are paying by card are almost equivalent to the UK Amex percentages.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it's all interesting. And that's where I find you can keep digging with all this stuff of, I'm no energy expert, but the whole mining stuff. And I remember we ran a Spaces and I was like, mining's not going to work in the UK, surely. And then you've got these really bright people going, well, actually, you could do this, that, the other, and then and you're like, whoa.
But when the penny drops, which is the amount of wind power we have that is excess that we can't use, that we pay those providers to switch the wind turbines off because the grid can't handle it, and you go, well, again, it's broken money that's driving that, because those turbine owners are completely disincentivized to work with Bitcoin, because why would they? It's harder work than just taking the money off the government, which is off us. Well, just more debt, isn't it?
On that was so off the back of that, and there's a city in the UK that's got they've been trying for years to rejuvenate a hydro project in the middle of the city that is defunct, and they've had a couple of million. This group have had a couple of million quid's worth of funding. Nothing's happened. Guess what? They've run out of money. Wonder where that's gone. Just a few salaries, a few, lunches with
advisors and consultants.
Yeah. And then one of the guys at the back of the space, I said, hey, will you just have a look at this? And had all these power metrics and whatever. Anyway, he came back, mailed me and said, this is feasible. Yes, there's a cost to infrastructure, but this city essentially, and I think he said with the power, approximately mine about 17 BTC a year from this particular bit of hydro. And I was like, wow. And of course, there's a cost. He goes, but the offshoot of that is that the heat generated could provide energy for some of the businesses on this particular road close, or it could be diverted to the university or what have you. And you're like, wow. So, of course, in my, as you know, traditional style of, viral door knocking, of just going, right, who are these people? I'm going to get their email, call them, whatever. Just no interest. And you do wonder, actually, is it about incentives that it's like, oh, no, please, don't show us something that works, because we're quite happy getting these grants and just taking a salary and sitting on our backside to just go, we need more. We don't want a solution now. We'd rather have one in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another trait of a lot of Bitcoiners is, as much as we have low time preference for things like number go up, etc., actually we like to do stuff and get stuff done.
Yes.
We're quite action driven.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I think that's a really positive trait. But I agree, places like that are just, they're on the gravy train, aren't they? They're
yeah, and it's sad, and yeah, I mean, you look at, who knows what's going to happen with politics in this country, but some of the stats you're seeing that you sort of know, like, I mean, I'm lucky actually. Whilst I'm Southwest London, we pay the lowest council tax in the UK, and it's a pretty efficient council. Crikey, some of the stats you're seeing on X from prominent figures about, this one and that one and where the money's going. And, do you know 40% of your council tax goes to paying the pensions of, I mean, and this isn't a today thing, but I do think over the next probably, 3 or 4 years, this will, get out there. And certainly the youngsters, who are finding it, you imagine you graduated, you found a job, your job is paying, you got a job, it's doing okay, but I've got it with a nephew of ours, house sharing, renting a room. Well, I remember coming down to London and, I'd be out 5 nights a week. I was commission only, but I'd be out 5 nights a week. These people would be lucky to be out twice a month. When you've paid your, 75% of your net income on your room, you're then paying a tenner a day to get in to work. Try and find a lunch in London, even a sandwich and a drink for less than 8-9 quid. You're not going to. Don't know how they do it.
No, and then that has a knock-on effect on all those businesses, doesn't it? And
it's
a downward spiral of
big time,
boom, really, because then people aren't going out to restaurants and pubs as much, and then they struggle, so they employ fewer people. And
100%, 100%.
Yeah, it's not great. But so one of the things I'm interested to ask you, Jay, is being that little bit older and closer to accessing pension and all that kind of thing, how, without kind of, I'm not asking you for kind of numbers and even percentages, but how do you balance your kind of Bitcoin maxi levels versus other savings and investments that you've got?
I mean, you obviously take property out of this, 80%,
Okay.
85.
Are you taking what about pension? Are you taking pension out of that?
I never had one till recently.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was always, I'd never sort of agreed with it. But recent turn of events in the UK with various options,
Okay.
made sense.
I might have to have a chat with you off air about
But
that.
the whole, I think it's because a lot of my friends work in finance and some of them financial advisors at a young age. I was like, hold on a minute. I remember like mortgage brokers going, right, okay. So mortgage brokers, oh yeah, we don't want the fixing for 5 years. You want the fixing for 2 because in 2 years' time, I'm going to come knocking and switch them again and get paid again. Same with financial advisors, which is why it's been really interesting in the spaces seeing the likes of your Alan Smiths and other guys who are, but there's a lot of IFAs who really do not, I don't believe, look after their clients. It's just almost they are creating this passive residual revenue for themselves, looking after someone's assets. And that's what I really liked about BTC was, hey, there's no one taking a charge on this. There's no one sure I could go and put it with a certain custodian or do something with it. But it was just sort of pure. Whereas a lot of the other stuff, I was just like, this just doesn't interest me. And I see my staff. I've got close to 100 employees. 70% of them are employees, 30% self-employed. But the employees got a workplace pension for the last decade. It's been terrible. It's been terrible.
Yeah, I think if you're in a standard nest or one of those basic, and then of course the default fund they put you in is very risk averse, which basically means you're in bonds, which means you're losing money.
Oh, they're down. They're down. Luckily, a quarter of them, 2.5 years ago, I said just start accumulating through your net pay. So that has worked, and then we're going to relaunch that once Cartwright have their payroll product ready in the UK. And I think we'll get close to 100%. Well, in fact, we will get 100% because myself and my business partner said we are going to enroll everyone and actually partake in it on their behalf.
Right.
And if they want to top up, that's fine.
Talk to me about this Cartwright product.
So it's going to be Sam Roberts, Cartwright, those guys. We used it years ago with a different company that didn't survive, not to do with this product. So it's going to be just a product where an employer can go to their employees and say, would you like to put a portion of your net earnings into BTC?
Okay.
And so from every payroll, be that weekly or monthly, employee A could go £5 a week, employee B 30 quid a week, and it's just done. And then it goes back to their own wallet, which would be a Lightning wallet, and we can talk about custody and all that. But it's just a way of supercharging it in terms of just your return. That the staff I've had, I think in 2.5 years, I think their return is about 180% paper so far. The 10-year pension return, I did this other day with a couple of the sales guys and ladies who aren't actually in the Bitcoin program. I think it's gone up 37% in 10 years, which hasn't kept up with inflation.
No.
So what a lovely little, and some of these guys are doing it for grandchildren or their kids or, and it's just, you just don't miss it. I mean, how many people give 5, 10, 20 quid a month to charity in the UK? Millions. And I'm not saying all charities are bad, but crikey, putting that bit of money away. So I think there's a real opportunity with like angling this towards kids and savings accounts and kids' education of, okay, well, I've had a daughter born tomorrow. I'd love her to go to this school or do this. Well, just start stacking a little bit every single day, week.
Yeah, absolutely. My 9-year-old son has pocket money in cash or Bitcoin every week.
Nice.
And I was showing him the chart, and we looked back on the day he was born. It was $250 in 2015. And I was like, oh, if only I'd bought you. I could have bought you 4 Bitcoin when you were born, but I didn't. But there you go. It's but no, and I think the old adage, that the thing where a lot of people still, normally still think you can only buy one Bitcoin. But
yes,
like when people understand you can buy a pound's worth of Bitcoin, then
I don't think retail is not coming back, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been in a few groups talking about that, and I think there's like my view is it's definitely not got frothy with retail coming back, but I think there are other ways in now, aren't there? Like the Bitcoin treasury companies in America. There's BlackRock. I mean, that isn't all institutional money, is it? Some of that is retail shifting their
but I think I think your younger retail, maybe they'll hit Bitcoin treasury companies, but I think FTX did more damage to people's confidence than people would admit. But I think Bitcoin itself has skipped, and Christ, I'm only 4 and a bit years into it, and everyone has every prediction under the sun, which I never do. But the nature of the buyer of the asset is completely different to what it was 4 years ago. And I think, from my point of view, these are, if you've got institutions, they don't run on 4-year cycles. They run on decades. Pension funds, decades, all this. So I think it's going to probably work out very differently to how a lot of people do. And I think...
Do you think that there'll be less of a kind of boom and bust cycle and just more of a slightly less volatile on the way up and maybe a bit less violent on the way down?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's almost like there's a huge amount of buyers of last resort now. I mean, you're talking Price Sailor advising Pakistan. You've got the US, apparently. You've got countries mining it. This isn't some dude with $2,000 in his savings account. So, again, no prediction on price, but I don't see these. If there are massive drawdowns, I would see they'd be very quick by the very nature of it. But I think it's probably going to go up a bit less and a bit more slowly than people think, but it's going to be almost this grind. And bear in mind, the biggest asset managers in the world make fees on this. So if the price was to drop 50%, well, BlackRock, Fidelity et al. Are making half the fees. So I think the game has completely changed. Completely changed. But I don't agree, and I think people like Samson, Mao, and whatever. I think they have become a bit of an embarrassment. A lot of these people who these sort of quoting certain price targets, and they're probably looking for clicks. But I think it's going to frustrate the life out of people.
What? Because it won't go up
because it
fast enough and high
and it won't go down. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of people on the sidelines. I know a lot on the sidelines. Oh, it'll revisit 50K. Well, they were the same people saying it hit 10K. And you're right.
Really, as you've said earlier, Jez, in this, the environment we're in now and the kind of institutions that are involved, that almost feels like
it's embarrassing.
Yeah, it feels like extreme hopium. But I mean, that seems more ridiculous than
but
it's saying it's going to go to $1 million in.
But
6 months.
I think a lot of retail now. I think there's another side to this, is that a lot of people in the UK with a lot of wealth. Where is their wealth? Their wealth is in their house. That house value over the last couple of years is not what it was 2 years ago. The access to finance to remortgage or leverage it isn't what it was. There's a huge amount of people who on paper have some wealth who could buy some BTC. They actually can't.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah. And that's a very different position to 4 years ago, where house pricing was flying up, interest rates were close to zero, and anyone, including me, could have borrowed, extended the mortgage, at a really low rate, and put some of that into Bitcoin.
Yeah, 100%.
Now that's
not, that's not possible.
No. And it's almost the opposite, isn't it? Which is the house pricing is softening, rates are going up. So someone that bought that, make a number up, £500,000 house 4 or 5 years ago at 2% interest is now having to remortgage. Their house has gone up since then, but to remortgage at maybe 4 and a bit percent is a massive outlay.
Oh, it's massive. And then in certain areas like private school, VAT on school fees, which is, you've got 2 or 3 kids, it's big deal. And then just the cost of everything. We all know, don't we, Gary, of going to the supermarket or out for dinner or, it's just, so I think that's the other thing with retail is
that disposable income just isn't there, is it?
It's just not there at all.
Because again, even people getting pay rises, it's eaten away by the fiscal drag of those tax thresholds not moving.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the government, will say, "Oh, great, people are getting pay rises. National minimum wage is going up."
Whereas what you've got, which is stuff that we'll work on at the collective, is the small, mid-sized UK business employs 60% of the workforce. The good ones are profitable. They are making money. That great stat from Alica Bank, the Challenger Bank, saying, I think it was, and this is a year or so ago, that I think UK SMEs sit on 380 billions worth of cash savings. Over half of it is at 0% interest rates. And the reason being, your SME, I run an SME, the rates I can get in any savings in my business are not like the corporations can get. So then you're like, okay, well, what might you have done before? And this is where, you're not as a business owner going to maybe lock, unless you've got your money up in a property because it's a liquid. Stock shares. Now, BTC is the ultimate with a portion as a business owner, not everything, because you can't yet pay all your employees or suppliers in it. You can't. But as my business does, 12% of every invoice, price agnostic, every Friday just goes. So I know that 12% I shouldn't need for years, but God forbid I did, and there was a problem on a Saturday night, it's so liquid, I can just exit the position on a Sunday morning. The poll I put out after one of the spaces was how many people, A, work for are an employee, self-employed, retired or unemployed. And I think it was 47% were self-employed. And it was about 200 people, so it wasn't a bad. And I think the UK, I can't speak for other countries, there's been a massive move with the businesses going, you know what, we've got a good business, we need to future-proof it, we're making some money, inflation's raging, and I think this is where your whole treasury, payroll for employees, if you're the right type of business, payments, and then this whole community, the guy who's just put a whole AI system in with us and our reporting in my business, I met him at a Bitcoin meetup. He's now speaking to 3 or 4 other businesses of guys I know and people I know. So I think it's this sort of community of business owners that, is powerful.
It is, and I think it's the credibility aspect as well, because the more people that Joe Bryan describes it as like there's lots of white molecules and you get a Bitcoiner as an orange molecule.
Yeah.
And you just need that.
He's doing his physics, isn't he?
The bounce, yeah, exactly. It is physics. But, the more orange molecules there are,
yes,
that then create more, bounce to a white molecule.
Yeah.
And it'll become some of them become passing conversations, like you're out with friends and one of them says, well, typically a Bitcoiner at some point will probably bring Bitcoin up and see what reaction they get. If you're someone that's credible and you've got experience and they value your opinion on other aspects of life, it's like, oh, this guy's into Bitcoin. That's interesting.
And that was one of the interesting things from having the onboarding merchants and running events for a couple of years. It was amazing. Every merchant who had an event, the end of it would say the same thing, or the day after would go, my God, what a nice set of positive people. We weren't expecting that. And I think that's, given we could all wake up and say, Jesus, what's happening with the world? You can list 1,000,001 things that's going wrong. But actually, I think as Bitcoiners at the moment, we just, have living this slightly, we're sort of in the fast lane and just concentrating and doing what we do.
Well, it's weird. It seems to me like it's a bit of a juxtaposition where on one hand, every Bitcoiner is a doomsday foreseer because they can see what's coming on one hand, but we know there's a solution and we're on that life raft and we're helping to try and make that exit happen. But it's interesting. So what's your best advice for getting merchants on board? Because we're in Bury St Edmunds. There's only a few companies that would accept Bitcoin, and me and a friend are sort of looking to try and increase that. And I think we've both got slightly different routes into trying to persuade them.
So in London, you're slightly spoiled. It's a denser population, more people, more Bitcoiners, more will support, whether with Bitcoin or with just fiat. Bury St Edmunds, less Bitcoiners. You know, a friend of mine, he's on Orange Pill app, lives in Lincolnshire. He goes, there's no one near me for 60 miles. So I think in your neck of the woods, unless it was a regular meetup, question the validity, unless it was like my butcher in London. He doesn't advertise he accepts Bitcoin, but he likes to take mine and another dozen people's weekly, monthly meet in Satoshis. So you've got your meetup venue where it's an obvious that every fortnight, month, whatever it is, there's a group of people come down, they'll support you on a Wednesday night. I mean, that is a no-brainer. It's free to do. Hospitality's crying out that, oh, life's so bad. Well, let's go and put, 750 to $3,000 in your till every Wednesday, once a month or whatever. But I do think it can be done the wrong way. And I think the wrong way is getting a business to accept it who you know is just not going to benefit because there's no Bitcoiners. And there's a lot of Bitcoiners in the UK who will not transact in it.
Yeah, true.
So I think that part of it is very early, as it probably should be. And actually, it's why I backed off it a little bit, because I probably onboarded 35, 40 merchants. Being brutally honest, you have to sort of coach them. They're not going to. It's not been a great success for many of them because the Bitcoiners won't transact. So what do you want to do? So I'm not, I'm certainly not anti-payments. I'm very pro, but I think that we have to be realistic about the follow through.
Yeah, I think sometimes it will be a hidden as well. So it might be a Bitcoiner goes to a shop because they've seen that they accept Bitcoin, but they might just go and use their credit card anyway. Yes. And unless they have that conversation with the merchant and say, by the way,
yeah, which they they don't do. But so yeah, I would, where you are, just try and find some independent, family-owned restaurant, bar, something where literally the husband and wife initially can just put wallet associate on their phone within a second, and a few of you turn up. Suddenly then, the minute the first transaction is done, they're on board.
Yeah.
So if I've got some time and I can come up, we'll get that done. Because I've literally, I do have it down pat. I mean, the local place on Northcote Road I went to the other day next to my daughter's maths place, it was 4 minutes. And then an hour later, we've got an event next Thursday.
Okay.
26th of June. And there's 40 people coming. But that's London for you. It's different.
Yeah. I think the other thing maybe we've got in our favour, though, is it's quite a tourist destination.
Yes.
Bury St Edmunds. So, and there's quite, because of the military air base, there's a lot of Americans, and American uptake of Bitcoin is probably higher than it is in the UK. Whether it is in the American military, I don't know. But, so again, maybe it's us having hopium, but we kind of think if we could
They don't like transacting in it, do they?
No, well...
Until Steak and Shake came about, because they hated it. And Sailor is the first to say...
Don't spend your Bitcoin.
Don't, yeah. But then these Steak and Shake guys come along who are probably the equivalent of like Honest Burger or something, I imagine. They come along and they've had a great PR exercise and, But it's going to be small, it's tiny. For even your local little restaurant that holds a meetup once a month, it's a tiny portion of their revenue.
Yeah, but also when things are tough, I think my angle on it is, even if a retailer does not understand what Bitcoin is, doesn't know what it is, doesn't care about it at all, but just wants a way to get more customers. Well, if you go down the route of, there are solutions where effectively they never see the Bitcoin. They just get the GBP in their bank, but the Bitcoiner has paid and transacted in Bitcoin and it's immediately converted. So even as you don't have to care about Bitcoin. You don't have to understand about Bitcoin if you don't want to. We recommend you do, but if you don't want to, just look at this as good marketing.
Yeah, it's made me question business owners. Like, we can say the UK is a tough place to run a business. Have to be honest with you, there's loads of shit business owners. So, the people who are naysayers say, well, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't accept that. No. They're the same people whose business just doesn't work. And it's not about accepting, but it's just being open to new and creative ideas.
Absolutely.
And you are finding, I've found, like the guy Steve at Boom Bat Burger, who's expanding and opening places, the guy at Pinterest, these places are busy places. They're busy places because they offer a great end product. The same people who are open to payments, and not just payments, but other stuff on top, and building a little treasury for themselves, probably goes hand in hand with why they're doing okay already. Whereas you maybe take, and I'm from the north, you go down a northern town that's not doing so well and go say, do you fancy accepting Bitcoin payments? They'll just tell you to F off. Because actually it's, and I do think, in this country and around the world, as a business owner, you can almost have no excuses. And it's how I've always operated. Is there's a lot of people now blaming Keir Starmer, blaming the government, blaming this, blaming that. No, you run a shit business and you are not very good at it. And actually, probably what happened was you got kept alive through COVID by being given a handout, and you come out the other side, it's a bit tough, you're not good enough.
I mean, I think some of the policies that have been put in and tax rises obviously aren't helping, but if the business isn't successful
they're
anyway,
not, but there's such a lack of, I think there's a lack of entrepreneurial spirit where people just sit on their backside and expect customers and things to come to them, almost like they have some divine right to make revenue. It's like, come on. I've got a friend of mine who runs a small pub chain, unbelievable, cutting edge, guest chef series, like unbelievable. I've got someone else I know who's in the similar game, who says this market is terrible and I can't survive. Called work ethic and just a bit of discipline.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And I think that's where we get it as self-employed business owners with Bitcoin, is discipline. It's a, big thing, isn't it?
Definitely. So Bitcoin treasury companies, what's your view on those? Where do you sit on the Bitcoin fence?
I like it. Why wouldn't you?
Well, there are Bitcoin maxis that are quite anti-Bitcoin treasury companies.
Yeah, but they're, again, you can't see the future. But so, yes, there's the Bitcoiner who just wants, people around a campfire buying Bitcoin, no one else and whatever. Well, forget them for a second. You've then got, I guess I found interesting is there's a lot of people who are very pro-micro strategy who seem a bit rattled in the last few weeks.
Well, because the price hasn't gone up.
Yeah, and I put a post about it, said, well, hold on a minute, you had your chat, you were the guys crowing about your SIPs and whatever. I think these businesses are not buying BTC to go and sell it again next year. They're locking it away. If you just look at the fundamental, and I might be naive, you've got the first time that you've got a fixed supply of an asset. It's global, whether the guys at Bitcoin Magazine, I know some people like them, some people aren't so sure with that. These companies, Metaplanet, Smarter Web in the UK, now Coincilium, Stacking, they're a very different buyer to Joe Bloggs with 10 grand in his savings account. And I think it's a different game. I said to someone the other day, I said, if Smarter Web keep doing what they're doing over a few years, and I know they said yesterday they'd love to be a FTSE 100 company this year. These guys probably won't be a web design business. They'll be a Bitcoin bank.
Yeah.
Because they hold the assets. So I don't know. I'm not bright enough to see it. I think it can only be a good thing. Well, how can it not be a good thing? You've got the whole, and whilst it was a quite salty article, the whole, was it the Mail this last weekend or the weekend before? There was something about Smarter Web, and then the FT. And the FT. So the Mail did it a couple of weeks ago. It's actually quite a good one. And then the FT, that sort of, how does this not crash?
Yeah, or let's all wait for it to crash.
No such thing as bad PR. So I think it's a good thing done the right way. I'm chatting to a professional sports team as we stand right now, and this is going to take a little bit of time, but there's been 3 or 4 meetings, and they're sizable, and it's all positive.
Yeah. I
It
think
helped Paris Saint-Germain had it on their balance sheet.
Yeah. I think some of the criticisms people have are the principle of MNAV. So with strategy, you're paying $400 for $200 worth of Bitcoin just by it yourself, people would say. Now, of course, for people that have been in for a much longer period of time, they've benefited from the flywheel of the Bitcoin yield and Bitcoin price going up. And of course, a lot of people, me included, bought MicroStrategy in their pension because how else can they get Bitcoin in their SIP? There's no other way, and there certainly wasn't. A couple of years ago when I started buying it, there was no other way to do that. And
I think one word of caution would be, I bet you there's a load of people who are treasury company maxes who hold no Bitcoin themselves. That, I think, is a big risk.
Agreed. Yeah, completely.
And, I until weeks ago had look exposure. For me, aside from the newly formed SIP, which has done okay, treasury companies, I'm not a trader because I just buy through the business, but I do potentially see the treasury companies as a way to acquire more Bitcoin. I don't particularly care about the treasury company, but if that price jumps and I've got some, I will be siphoning it into the asset itself.
Yep. And that's always, if you do it in a smart way through an ISA, which is tax free.
Yeah.
Which again, the maxes sometimes conveniently forget that, if you have gains in an ISA, the government's not going to come knocking at your door.
What's going to be interesting with the treasury companies was I think Smarter Web and Coincilium and there's others have been smart, but they've almost got the perfect setup in the UK. There is no access to ETFs. So I think it's going to be really interesting because all I'm hearing day in, day out is, there's going to be another company, another treasury company. You put that when BlackRock, Fidelity ETFs are there. It's not a huge market anymore, the UK. Well, we think we are, but we're not. I remember chatting to Freddie New once, said, yeah, but the UK, and he went, we're in irrelevance. And it's like, oh, yeah, we are. So I think that is an interesting one is, will the person in their SIP or ISA who has made a paper profit reasonably, will they keep it in this treasury company or will they send it to BlackRock's ETF?
I think the majority of people would at least take some.
Yeah, so that's going to be a
some
really
that would take all, there'd be some that would,
of when that timing aligns. But again, there's a lot of people you can see online, the euphoria, who have done so well in terms of paper gains or profit. Actually, they've got to thank the FCA for that.
You're right.
Because
it's the
only outlet.
Yeah.
Or they are the only outlets. And it's very exciting to watch and good on everybody who's participated. It's great. You want people to do well and people are doing well.
Yeah. And it's doing well off the back of Bitcoin as well.
Absolutely. And that's what, people are investing and they're buying BTC.
Yeah. I think there are probably some that are trading these Bitcoin treasury companies a bit like an altcoin. But as you say, if they're doing that in order to get more fiat so they can buy more sats, it's a strategy. It might be.
Yeah, but it sort of doesn't matter to me because their money at the end of the day is going to buy more BTC at the treasury company.
Yeah.
Who cares what they do with it?
Yeah. And what about this concern about proof of reserves?
I see all this chat with Saylor about. I'm sorry, I trust Saylor's no fool, and I'm not that bothered with all of that stuff. I think Saylor has his reasons, and he displayed them in an interview, and I actually agreed with it. So I just think there's a load of keyboard warriors who sit on 1,000 quid's worth of Bitcoin and decide to go on Twitter one night and call everybody out. It's the same as the self-custody crew. Self-custody, absolutely, as a purist, right thing to do. I have staff of mine who should not and cannot self-custody. They are far better off. Having an account with Zappo Bank or Coin Corner that hasn't been hacked, because if you give them a complex setup And I've had it today. There's a company that was servicing the UK called Zumo, a Scottish company who have decided no longer to carry on with their retail offering as an exchange. And they've emailed all the customers and said, look, you've got till the 15th of August to get your funds off our platform. You know, these people in there, non-technical staff of mine who have had stuff in their Infinity wallets, they've got a seed phrase. They're now panicking, going, oh, I think I've got this seed phrase, but what do I do with this? What do I do with that? What do I do? I hate to say it, you know, it's for everybody and there is no one size fits all. And I think, you know, the whole people of this is the way and this is the only way, in whichever it is, are just wrong. Just it's for everybody.
I think it's most people who would understand how it works would say if you're capable of, you know, having a seed phrase and being completely, you know, independent, having your own self-custody, just literally with 12 words, 24 words written down, it's in your head, whatever. If you can do that with confidence, good luck to you. You know, that's the purest way to do it.
Absolutely the best way to do it.
Yeah. But I mean, but that comes with risk as well. You've got to, you know, and for the individual that might have stress about where am I going to keep these words, and have I got to inscribe them into metal?
I had it from a staff member of mine who raised a very valid question on the phone not so long ago. And they'd been researching it and said, oh, these lost coins, how have they been lost? And basically their argument was, and it was really interesting, was, okay, and you've heard people you've heard people who are self-custody advocates talk about losing all their coins and getting speaking slots at certain events. And you're like, right. And this person was like, so I'm not great technically. I don't particularly have any family or whatever. Am I better doing this or just leaving it on somewhere that, or a few places that hasn't been hacked? Because how have people lost their coins? Yes, there's hacks, but a lot of it has been
human error. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's that balance, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess the purists would say, you know, part of the problem we've got in the current system is there's too much trust of banks and institutions, and Bitcoin solves that because you should be self-sovereign. And again, I see that, and I like and I agree with those principles. But to your point, if the only people that buy Bitcoin, or if the criteria for buying Bitcoin is you have to be completely self-sovereign, we're never going to get the level of people. We're never going to get.
There's people I've fallen out with who go, buy Bitcoin, self-custody, don't believe in spending it, never borrow against it, never use it. All right.
Why? What's the end
Where
game?
do we go there? I mean, these people are, you know, in my opinion, challenged because that just doesn't work.
Yeah. You have to. It's individual. I know it's an individual thing, but if you don't have a plan for your Bitcoin, ultimately, well, why did you buy it in the first place?
Absolutely. And I love transacting it. Whenever I can transact, I spend and replace. And we're fortunate in the UK that within 29 days, not a taxable event, etc. But that has been the biggest thing for me, is not only onboarding merchants, but the merchants where I've transacted a few times, they're now building treasuries, not with mine, they're building their own treasuries. And there's some big discussions going on with, you know, reasonable sized businesses now. Their first touch point was payment.
Yeah.
No disrespect to the little guy who's taking 2 double espressos a month in Sats who isn't keen. We're talking about a small restaurant chain who are going, gap in the market here. This could be Bitcoin powered. Oh, and did I tell you 20% of our profits is going into BTC and has been for a year? And you're like, whoa, hold on a minute. So, yeah, that's really exciting. But that's what we're going to be doing at the collective. We'll, Jordan will come to that.
I'm going to meet him face to face in Prague this week.
Oh, nice.
Great. And then, we said after that we'll get something in the diary. But obviously, there's lots of you're not prepared to give any spoilers. But there's some. By the time this goes out, there'll be
news.
It'll be news. So
yeah, exactly.
I can't look into the future. But yeah, by now everyone will know. But no, it's great. It's great that there's exciting things have happened, and kind of it evolves, and there's
mate. So much exciting stuff. So much doesn't make makes you feel young again.
You still are young,
mate. But it really does. It makes me feel so positive about the future.
Yeah, that's great.
Especially you and I have got little ones a similar age, but it's just I've stopped. I don't read the news, listen to I mean, you see the odd thing, but you're just like, no, head down. This is the focus now.
Yeah.
Day job, family, BTC, everything will be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like that. Conscious we're both kind of sweltering in this heat in our
and I need to cook my dinner.
Yeah, well, yeah, hungry man.
Raw steak over the fire with my
nice.
Stamping a seed for it. No, I'm joking.
Washed down with a glass of creatine, yeah. Yeah, so the last question I ask all my guests, Jez, is what's one belief you held before Bitcoin that you've completely changed your mind about?
Governments had their best interests of the people at heart. I was not a political person, never paid any attention. Family always voted Tory. I voted Tory and thought, oh, they must be good people. What nice people. Working hard to look after everyone. Then suddenly you go down a rabbit hole. You're like, my mind has changed. And is there anything else? Yeah, probably the other thing is that, I could never before. It was property was the hardest asset and the must own asset and the only own asset, and property only goes up in value. It was my generation, I guess you're similar to me. We've sort of witnessed that.
Yeah, and benefited from it. And benefited from
exactly.
It.
Yeah. So, and then now you're going to see a whole shift with, whole AI coming in. And again, I find that really exciting. It's new. You've got to embrace it.
Yeah. And what's AI going to use for micropayments?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
We know the answer to that. It's not going to be pounds and dollars, is it?
Well, no. My father-in-law would still try and send a check.
Yeah, you don't see many of those these days.
I think they've got non-Christmas cards and birthday cards with checks. They just never get cashed because there's never a bank that's open.
Yeah.
They just fray in your wallet and then just disintegrate. So, good saving of money. So, Martin Lewis, money saving expert tip: send someone a check.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, and they expire after 6 months, I think, as well. So
yeah, that's right.
I've had ones sitting in a drawer, and I'm like, shit, it's gone out of date. But yeah, that's the way it goes. Okay, so if anyone wants to reach out to you, Jez, where's the best place for people to find you?
Just on X at jcasttweet. On there relatively regularly. And then, we got the Bitcoin Town Hall, the Spaces, and then the Bitcoin Collective, which is the newsletter and the weekly podcast Jordan does, or sometimes bi-weekly, actually. And there's been a real shift to try and make that. There's still going to be some global guests, but more UK focused. And then, events and whatever, we do a few. And so sorry I can't come to yours.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, if it clashes with a family event, then it's forgivable.
Just clashed, and I was like, oh no. But there's lots going on in the UK.
Yeah, and it's exciting times.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Thanks for being on, Jez. It's
pleasure.
Catch up.
Good to see you again, as always.
Yeah, you too. All right. Thanks very much.
Cheers, pal.